Welcome to this special episode of The Heartbeat today as Zimbabwe joins the rest of the world in commemorating World AIDS Day, which is celebrated on the 1st of December annually around the globe. Now, we are commemorating this day, but it is marked, during the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence international campaign that has the mandate to challenge violence against women and girls. Now, the World AIDS Day is an opportunity for people worldwide to unite in the fight against HIV, to show support for people living with HIV, and to commemorate those who have passed away from HIV-related diseases over the years. Now, this year, the world commemorates this day in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, and that has threatened humanity with a second wave. We all know that several countries are already going into second stages of lockdown because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but it has, of course, had far-reaching consequences, especially on the fight against GBV and the fight against HIV and AIDS. Now, in the studio with me, I do have a panel, but it would be a bit appropriate, I suppose, for me to introduce myself. My name is Candice Mwakaliele, and this broadcast is brought to you by Zimpaper's TV network with support from the Spotlight Initiative, the Swedish Embassy in Zimbabwe, UNFPA, and Say What. Now, to my panel, please let me give you this opportunity to introduce yourselves. I'll start with you, gentlemen.
My name is Walter Wengesai. I'm the National Director for Padari Engundleni, Men's Forum on Gender. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for joining us, ma'am.
Thank you for having me. My name is Esnat Swanda from Say What, and I'm coordinating a movement for female students called Work for Life Network.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you for having me on your show. My name is Teddy Ogondo. I'm from the Harare Institute of Technology, and I'm in Say What. I'm a peer educator, and I'm also a representative of the National Council for Say What.
All right. Now, this panel will be helping me dissect our topic today, but of course, just for a bit of background. Now, Zimbabwe is coordinator of the National HIV Response. The National AIDS Council notes with concern how the pandemic has, with no doubt, brought unprecedented challenges on the globe's HIV fight, as all attention and resources have been shifted towards fighting the pandemic. The coming of COVID-19 has increased the vulnerability of marginalized groups to HIV. COVID-19 restrictions led to a spike as well in cases of gender-based violence, with sexual abuse topping the list of violence against especially women and girls. Now, this therefore calls for a dual action against GBV as well as HIV in order to defeat AIDS and, of course, the public threat that it poses to everyone in Zimbabwe. Now, as we get into our topic, the theme for this year, the global theme for this year is Global Solidarity, Shared Responsibility, Ending AIDS by 2020. Today, however, with the panel, we will be looking at dual action against GBV and HIV. But before we get into our discussion, let us have a quick message from the National AIDS Council's Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Bernard Madzima.
The World AIDS Day theme for 2020 is Global Solidarity, Shared Responsibility. This is in light of COVID-19 pandemic, which has threatened to regress the achievements made in the HIV program. Countries have realized that no one is safe until everyone is safe. So we want everyone to put their hands on the deck, both the developed countries and the developing countries, and make sure that they fight HIV and COVID-19 together. One of the what we call the key populations in terms of high incidence and prevalence of HIV is actually in the young people, the adolescent girls and young women. So as a country, we have developed models which try to address that specific age group, because we realize that they are very vulnerable to HIV infection. And we have programs which we are carrying out in the tertiary institutions, in the primary and secondary school-going children, and even those who are out of school, because we realize that they are vulnerable to issues of child marriages, to gender-based violence, and to abuse, sexual abuse.
Right, now, I think a good place for us to start this discussion, of course, will be, the global theme is Global Solidarity, Shared Responsibility, Ending AIDS by 2030. So I suppose I should ask you, what does this theme mean to you? And what do you think what your interpretation is as an individual, as well as the various organizations that you are representing? Walter, I will start with you.
Yes, I think that's a good indicator of what we want to do, the theme by 2030, ending HIV and AIDS by 2030. And I think what we've been doing from our side is Padari Engundleni, Men's Forum on Gender, is that we have been approaching this from the side of men as well. You know, men have got low health-seeking behavior, I think, which was also hampering efforts to achieve that goal. So I think it's something that is achievable if we all get into solidarity towards this aim.
All right, thank you. Esnat?
I think we are presented with two dilemmas, which is HIV and GBV, and all are happening at once in our society, and they would need dual action, or they would need collective action to fight against them, because we can't suspend one and deal with the other one. So as say what we have been doing both, putting all our efforts in fighting both GBV and HIV through our social behavior change communication, whereby we raise awareness on both HIV and GBV, fighting to end both, maybe looking at the targets that are set, both at regional level, at national level, even at international level.
All right, thank you. Taliwa?
All right, I think the theme for this year is quite amazing and great, and I think it's exactly what society needs, because most of the time when we have HIV happening or GBV, it's an act of two parties concerned, right? So if we then tackle into having both parties coming into play to actually put this into an end, then that means that this is the way that we need to eliminate it, because over the past years, we've seen that we've had women being educated about how to report gender-based violence, but then the cases have still been happening because the other party has not been concerned. So this is exactly what society needs, and I think it's a great initiative.
Right, now, Tadiwa, you're a female student, of course. Now, we do have the issues of GBV in tertiary institutions. Maybe you could just paint a picture for us. What is the current situation with GBV, especially in colleges, and how has it perhaps impacted the stats when we look at, the correlation to HIV and AIDS?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. So what I've noticed is gender-based violence is there. It's been perpetuating around and within the universities. But then the fact that people have not been reporting, we haven't been getting the clearer picture of whether it's actually there or whether it's not there. But the thing is, it's there for many various reasons. One of the reasons being how the social illness has not been clearly defined. If you go to university right now and if you ask students what is gender-based violence, everyone just has this misconception that gender-based violence is when a man hits a woman. But there is so much more to gender-based violence that students need to know. And for that reason, people think it's not there because they actually don't know that this is gender-based violence. It's not right and you're supposed to report it, right? And then the other reason being the fact that gender-based violence in universities is there, but the fact that the victims are usually victimized by people who are their acquaintances. So when this happens, we'd rather prefer to settle this on a personal note, and we think that it's okay because we have a relationship with that person, so we then don't report it as gender-based violence, but it's also there. If we try to talk of dissemination of nude pictures and the likes, most of the time that we have nude pictures leaking, you'd see that most of the time it's a girl's picture. It's barely a guy's picture. Most of the time it's a girl's picture. And the question is why, right? That people then ask. But then people think these are things that are normal, but it's gender-based violence because a person is disseminating yourself being naked. You're being sexually harassed in a way. And then in universities also, there is this issue of attempted rape, right, which is then not reported because it's attempted, it did not happen. But it's actually happening in universities. So I feel there's a need that we need to educate people in universities so that they can be able to report, because gender-based violence is happening in all institutions and colleges, but then people are just not clear about how it goes and what goes on other times.
All right, so you mentioned that, you know, number one, maybe that they're not aware that it's actually an act of gender-based violence, and number two, maybe that fear of ridicule. But do you think that there are structures, support networks in place in the institutions themselves that are conducive for somebody to come and report should something happen to them?
What I've noticed for most universities is that gender-based violence becomes an issue when it has actually happened. If it hasn't happened, people barely talk about it. They then start raising awareness or try to do something about it after it has already happened. So I feel like I've always asked the question, like, why don't we have monitoring systems that actually monitor such cases like gender-based violence, like a place where if you have been violated, then you can go and report. It needs to be there every day, not that you tell the students that it's there after it has already happened, because then it doesn't serve the purpose. So for now, I think that universities are not giving enough attention to this issue of gender-based violence, and we need to step up and do something, because it's leading to various detrimental effects, especially on the students.
All right. So Walter and Esnet, she does raise a very interesting point that, you know, nothing is done about this until it's actually happened. Now, I know that both your organizations work with various institutions and students within these institutions. Are you experiencing the same reports that they don't really have that support when, you know, they feel that something has happened or has the potential to happen? I can go and take it up with maybe a student counselor, or do you think students have these facilities and just don't know how to use them, or are they actually lacking, as Tadiwa has said? Walter, let's start with you.
Yeah, I do agree with Tadi that more needs to be done. The systems that are currently available, as she said, we mostly react to situations rather than prepare and prevent those situations from happening. And as she was talking, I was just thinking of how this is not just in universities, but across our society. I think we have normalized our violence to some extent, and she talked about sexual violence, and it's something that I can really relate to, because I'm thinking we have a lot of social norms that perpetuate the culture of patriarchy, where men can get away with a lot of murder, if I can say that, when it comes to offenses which disempower women, such as gender-based violence. So I think for me this is a power relations issue which really needs to be taken care of. Yes, we talk of systems that needs to be put in place, policies that needs to be put in place, but what we need, I think, is transforming the minds of the people to really come to agree that gender-based violence is a problem which needs to be solved, and not to normalize it. I can talk of the culture of rape, which is there, which no one is talking about. There is a culture of rape within marriages, amongst relationships in amongst young adults, and so on. But it keeps on continuing because no one is really saying anything about it. I can tell you, Candice, that recently we were having a dialogue with men in Bulawayo, and men agreed that women cannot consent verbally to sex. It's shocking, really, to say women cannot consent, which means that there is that culture where men get away with just reading signs.
Right.
I think she's
assumed
agreeable
she wants it. She said yes
to this, because in our culture, women can then not consent. So it goes back to what she was saying. It's really happening, but people don't really know that it's happening, or people don't really recognize that it's actually part of gender-based violence.
Thank you, Walter. Very interesting. Esnet?
I think I would want to agree with both of them that there is a gap between the students and the college facilities, whereby in other colleges we have harassment policies which are not so explicit or clear in terms of how sexual harassment is dealt with. And with other colleges, they are there. The policies are there, but they're not implemented fully. And some of the policies are embedded under HR, and HR department is part of the administration. So it's difficult for female students or male students to approach those authorities to report on sexual harassment, which is sometimes perpetuated by staff and maybe fellow students. So most of the cases, they go unreported. And sometimes during our dialogues in Web for Life network, we get to know that some students, some female students, like they fear or shy away from reporting these cases because they would be fearing for lower grades if they report the lecturer. So if you know the trending issue on thigh for a mark. So most of these cases, they go unreported because of fear of discrimination, stigma, and sometimes being questioned or ridiculed. How were you sexually harassed? Where were you? What were you dressing and stuff?
How did you end up there anyway? Why were you in that room when you shouldn't have been? I think it does become a big problem, Tadiwa, when you look at these situations where, especially the thigh for a mark situation, it's not a local phenomenon. It's something that has been widely reported, I think, across Africa as well. How are students dealing with trying to help each other, support each other, educate each other about this? You don't have to sleep with the teacher for them to give you marks. It doesn't matter whether you're a female student who has to deal with this or a male student. How are you guys tackling this issue?
Okay, so how we've been tackling the issue is that we've noticed that in a way this whole issue of thigh for a mark has somehow been normalized, whereby if you see that your friend is actually offering their thigh for a mark, you'd actually say, okay, that's a decision to make. So what we've been trying to do as peer educators is try to tell each other that it's not okay for you to do that, right? Like, the mark that you want, you can work, like girls feel that you've got nothing to lose, it's just a one-time thing, and then you get a mark. But then we've been trying to educate most of our peers that you need to set a value upon yourself. Yes, it's a one-time thing, but that one-time thing can have so many effects on you. So if you set a value for yourself, then you'd know that a mark is not worth a thigh. A thigh is worth so much more. So we've been doing various activities as to setting values upon yourself, knowing who you are and what you should do, and actually knowing that you should work hard. And also we've been having control systems whereby we actually frequently check that are there any students who are actually doing this in terms of offering a thigh for a mark, and also so that the lecturers don't do that. And then there's the issue that this can be voluntary or involuntary, right? In the case that it's actually involuntary, right? We've been having cases where sometimes the lecturers would come to you, they know that now it's not allowed, right? So they would come to you, instead of telling you, offer me your thigh and I'll give you a mark, they offer it to you in a way as if it's love, right? And girls, we know that as women we are emotional by nature, so when we have such issues like attention, you think that, okay, cool, so maybe I'm beautiful or something of that sort. But then what we've actually done is that you should know that it is not right to actually have a relationship with any lecturer on campus or something of that sort. So in that way we've been able to eliminate this whole thigh for a mark.
I actually did want to ask you, is there no actual rules against dating lecturers, professors in universities, tertiary institutions? Are there no actual penalties for this conduct? Esnat, help me out.
There are there. And in most cases when these things happen, they will be done under carpet and no one would even know, because the student won't speak about it, the lecturer won't even tell the fellow lecturers that I'm dating a student. Because what I know is if a student wants to date, if a lecturer wants to date a student, they should declare a conflict of interest somehow in their own boards, but it's not happening. And the fact that no one is talking about it, they will just do it for the sake of doing it and they'll get away with it, yes.
And we've normalized this situation where you are dating your teacher or your professor and you're quiet about it, and you maybe talk to your best friend about it, but nobody knows, and you think it's a normal relationship.
Yes,
the fact that you're saying like we are normalizing, it becomes there's this kind of value that you add to yourself, that I'm dating the teacher, yes. So yeah, I think it goes back to us as female students and young women, like the things that we put value in, they're the same things that like exposes us to these like toxic issues such as GBV and stuff. Because dating an older guy, when you're telling your peers, you'll be like, Nduku Manyana Blazer, and he's doing this for me, I have this new phone, I have this new gadget and stuff. But the issues that come like as impact to yourself and to the community around you
are far-reaching.
Exactly.
And Tadiwa, I suppose you don't have much control when you're in this situation, do you? You can't exactly say to him, if he decides he wants to sleep with you without a condom, he can say to you, well, if that's what you want, I'm going to leave you, and you're feeling some type of way about this relationship.
No.
You don't have much control. You don't have that authority, do you?
You don't. What he says is law. What he or she says is law. And also on what she was saying, that's why I was actually mentioning that the fact that people have normalized this whole die for a mark thing, there's a need to have a control system whereby we frequently check if this is happening, because it's better to check and not find it rather than to assume that it's not there at all, because it's actually there. So I think if we frequently have a control system for this, then that means that at least they would have some sort of fear over doing it, because now they just know that even if you do it, it's definitely
not going to be picked up.
Yeah, new episodes of getting away with gender-based violence.
Walter, I don't know if you have any interactions with teachers, though, in these institutions, male teachers especially. And if you do, are you aware of any of them actually saying, well, look, I was there minding my own business and the student came and she flashed me?
Not exactly like that, but we do interact with male teachers and male lecturers when in our different platforms. But the thing is, as she was saying, this has been more or less a culture in most institutions of higher learning, where it has been happening maybe for years, and challenging such harmful practices, I think it takes time. But I would like to say that most of the men who do this, they don't see anything wrong in that, because they would say, some of them will say, these are adults and they are consenting adults. But then where we come in as an organization that works for gender justice is on engaging them around the power imbalances, exactly what you were saying, that these will not be balanced relationships. There will be power imbalances, and there will be issues of power over the students, whether it's a male student or it's a female student. When you are a person in authority and you are having a sexual relationship with someone that you are working with, or with a student,
with someone whose life you literally control.
Yes. What happens when she decides to end it and you don't want it to end as a lecturer? There is room for retribution. Right. I know of a saying which used to be said when we were still in college, a lecturer saying that I'll give you 49.5 and see where she'll get the other half. So you see, there is that aspect of retribution when it comes to such relationships, and they don't end well, and they affect mostly their sexual and reproductive health issues that affect the student in a bigger way, especially the female students. So in my own opinion, there is need for continuous engagement of the lecturers and the teachers. Mind you, this is not only happening in universities. It's happening in primary schools. It's happening in primary schools, in secondary schools. It's happening in institutions of higher learning. We read about those issues where teachers claim to be dating their students in grade 7 or grade 6. So if you look at even this year, I remember reading such a story. So it's a culture that needs to be challenged, and that needs to be stopped with the robust policies and also real engagement, especially when the teachers or the educators are being trained. Issues to do with GBV, they really have to come out strong, and issues to do with the protection of the students as well.
Now, if we're looking at, you've just mentioned grade 7, and you've devastated me. Not because I'm naive to this happening, but surely at this point, if we're talking of minors, a teacher knows that if this child is in grade 7, this is a minor. They must know that. It now brings to the fact that maybe engagement is not enough. Do you think, Esnat, that there would be need for stricter penalties? I think right now, as it stands, if you're a teacher, you're not allowed to practice in that school anymore. You can go somewhere else. There's really not much paperwork following you to stop you from teaching anywhere else. Do you think we need to have stricter measures in place to stop these things from happening, Esnat? Okay.
That phenomenon whereby teachers take advantage of the students, even at primary level, we would call it sexual grooming. and they wouldn't do it so direct that the student would realize, or the pupil would realize, that I'm being violated. They'll start by asking the student to go clean their house, touch them, telling them they're beautiful, you have good eyes, sexy eyes and stuff. So when it's happening, the student will not even see it coming through to them. So the other thing also goes back to the way our policies are structured. We would see that we know that there is a legal penalty in terms of GBV and if one reports, but we see a disparity in terms of the penalties. Someone would get 2 years, someone would get 10 years, someone would go like with a bail or with a fine. So if we come up with maybe one maximum like penalty, maybe if we say if one perpetrates GBV on someone would get maybe 10 years plus, it will give like a stricter picture that we really want to deal with GBV in our communities.
Okay, now we must take a short break. The topic has become a bit heavy, but of course you are watching The Heartbeat as we focus on World AIDS Day today, and we are discussing a dual action against GBV and HIV if we are to attain this goal of eradicating both by 2030. Now this broadcast is brought to you by Zimpapers TV Network with support from the Spotlight Initiative, the Swedish Embassy in Zimbabwe, UNFPA, and Say What. Do stay tuned, we will come back. Welcome back to this special edition of The Heartbeat, where we are focusing on World AIDS Day, which is commemorated annually on the 1st of December around the globe. Of course, the topic for this year, the global topic, is Global Solidarity, Shared Responsibility, Ending HIV by 2030. However, in the studio, we are looking at dual action against HIV and GBV. As you know, these issues tend to be entangled. Now, of course, this broadcast is brought to you by Zimpapers TV Network with support from the Spotlight Initiative, the Swedish Embassy in Zimbabwe, UNFPA, and Say What. If you have been following the discussion from the point that we started, I hope you are chiming in. The platforms to use, of course, on Facebook, it's Zimpapers TV Network, and of course the Say What platform on Facebook as well. If you are on Twitter, it's at ZTN News. Please remember to drop your comments. Now, we have been in lockdown since the beginning, almost the beginning of this year, yeah? And that has had an effect on cases of GBV and, without stating it, of course, on HIV and AIDS statistics as well. But let's take a look at how exactly lockdown has affected GBV's fight.
We have seen a spike in gender-based violence cases. Why do we say so? Because we've been comparing our own internal data. If you look at the period between January to March, we recorded around 5,500 cases. Then we went into the second quarter, April to June. The numbers doubled. We recorded around 10,548, if I'm not mistaken, but I know it was over 10,000. Then between July to the third week of September, we are over 11,000. So if it's a graphical presentation, you can see that there's a line in terms of the increase in number of cases. The cases keep on increasing. I think in terms of the legislative environment, we are appealing to the committee that it pushes forward the minimum mandatory sentence on rape, because this has been one of the most prevalent forms of abuse that women and girls are going through. It's something that is worrying, because as much as there are deterrent sentences that are being given in court, those inconsistencies in terms of one judge gives you 10 years, the other one gives you 1 year, is disheartens women, because they then don't understand how it's classified that this rape was more brutal than the other. So it's something that we are appealing, Kuti, if they could look at a minimum mandatory sentence.
All right, so as we've heard, the statistics have been alarming. Numbers have gone up. They've spiked in the craziest way during lockdown. Walter, you work with various men, and 9 out of 10 times, men are the perpetrators of gender-based violence towards their wives, towards their girlfriends, towards their daughters, sisters. And we have been told that sexual violence has ranked highest in forms of GBV. When you have your discussions with the various men, what are some of the things that they are saying about this? How are they? I don't even want to say what's their defense. What's the thought process? What's going on?
Yes, cases have gone up during COVID-19, and with regards to sexual violence, you'll be surprised what no one really says. I've raped someone. There are always excuses, but what are
some of the excuses, perhaps?
What we tend to come across in most cases, men say that they have been framed. There was consent during sex, but then upon further explanation, as I've said before, that consent is never verbal. And then people tend to hide behind culture to say, in our culture, no woman ever says yes. That has to do with sexual violence. Then amongst married women, there is this thing called rora or lobola. I think a lot of men also hide behind it a lot. What does it mean for me as a man to pay lobola for my wife? For a lot of men, their interpretation is that it gives them unlimited sexual rights over that person, or if I can put it explicitly, sex on demand, which then means that they think that a married man cannot rape their own wife, which then leads to a lot of sexual violence against married women, because men don't ask for consent when they want it. They just keep on doing that. Then, of course, there are also power relations when it comes to issues of sex. People in relationships, women never really have a say in terms of when to have sex and how to have sex. Men always want to lead, and according to a lot of men, that's cultural as well. I have to take the lead because I am the man. And we also hear strange things like dressing is also something that comes up a lot. She wanted it because she was dressed in a certain way. She was inviting me to come. She acted in a certain way. So there are a lot of, I think, as I said before, social norms that tend to perpetuate that culture of sexual violence against women, and a lot of power which is given to men as a result of patriarchy also takes away that power to decide in terms of when and how women would want to have sex. And in some cultures, they're not even allowed to introduce the subject, or let alone talk about it, to say, at least now I want it or I don't want it. So yeah, I think we really need to challenge that patriarchal thinking, which takes away sexual rights of women and gives it to men.
All right. Now, I suppose I should have asked you this at the beginning of the discussion, but perhaps just take us through the setup of Padari. What is Padari's role in these discussions that we have with the men around gender-based violence, HIV and AIDS, sexuality, and all these issues that come into this fold of having to be addressed with men because we want the men involved?
So as I said before, Padari is an organization that works with men and boys for a gender-just society. We believe in a gender-just society where women and men have equal power and equal say in terms of what they want in their own lives. So how we conduct our activities, we operate nationally and we set up community groups of men which we then capacitate to have discussions around issues we know men shy away from discussing. For example, issues to do with consent, the issue that we've been discussing about. So we engage men and we give them a platform to say what they know or what they think consent is all about. So throughout Zimbabwe, we just go into communities, invite men for conversations, and then we give them capacity to continue having discussions. Also, mostly our approach is gender-based. So we believe that gender inequalities then result in gender-based violence, which then result in vulnerabilities towards certain groups, which include women and girls around issues to do with HIV and AIDS. So men can reach out to Padari to say, we want to form a group, we give them capacity, and they continue to have discussions around issues that are normally taboo within communities.
All right. Now, within that context of how you've explained it to us, how willing are men to come and talk about these issues? And how open are they when you say, no, actually, you know what? You can't just have sex with your wife. If she says she's not in the mood or she doesn't want to, you can't impose yourself on her. How open are they to these there would be new ideas, because we use a cultural shield to say, hey, culturally, she's my wife. I paid for her. So how open are they to these things?
Surprisingly, they are very open. Although we have incidences where some men actually walked away from meetings because we do discuss some issues that men are not comfortable with, such as, of course, issues to do with maternal health, issues to do with menstrual health, issues to do with gender itself. What we're basically saying to men is you have to give away some of the power that you wield because of patriarchy. But the reception has been amazing. Many have also been trapped with patriarchy, and they are willing to have those discussions, and they are willing also to come to safer spaces where they can discuss issues that they can't discuss in the open. For example, in the morning, we're even discussing issues to do with the violence against men. A lot of men also suffer gender-based violence, but they can't come out in the open and say it because of fear of being judged, fear of embarrassment, just being embarrassed to say this has happened to me. So surprisingly, there's a lot of demand for what we are offering.
You know, it's actually interesting that you bring up the aspect of violence against men, because a lot of the times, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the times you'll find a sexual assault, especially on a man, is the strongest form of a power play. If it's another man against a man, he's trying to demean him or bring him down a peg. You think you are up here, so let's bring you down. Bring you down a notch. Or if it's a woman who is now perpetrating this violence against this man, she probably is said to have anebeg. She has control on this relationship. She has the money, and he's wanting to get taken care of.
And society sometimes call her the one who is wearing the pants in the house, or the man of their house. I remember the story about Mariah Carey when she was once married to this guy. The guy used to be called Mr. Mariah Carey. But that's exactly how society treats issues to do with power and patriarchy. And also, I think gender-based violence, when it happens to men like that, it takes away their identity as the power holder within the household, and sometimes they are depressed, and sometimes they even commit suicide sometimes. So it's really something that is serious, and that's what we're trying to engage men around, that your masculinity is not defined by such things. You can redefine what manhood is depending on who you are and what you want as a man. And also we are dealing with a lot of toxic masculinities which uses brute force in terms of men getting what they want. So that's what we are challenging, and we are saying you can be a man even if you subordinate yourself, or even if you share duties with your wife, unpaid care work at home with your wife, even if you don't beat up your wife, because GBV is really about maintaining that power that men have over women. If you look at it, why was this woman beaten? She did not cook for me, she did not do this for me, she did not provide me this. So GBV...
Or she asked a question I didn't like.
Yes, she challenged my manhood, my status as the man at the house. So that's how we approach our programming at Padari. We believe that if we can have a society that is gender equal, then cases of gender-based violence will also reduce. Cases of HIV will also reduce, because there is a correlation between incidences of gender-based violence and exposure to HIV as well. You find that people who suffer GBV are more vulnerable to HIV compared to those that do not. So it's something that we are really passionate about. If we can have a gender equal society, then the scourge of GBV and even HIV, we can go a long way in eliminating that.
All right, thank you. Now, Tadia, before you actually contribute, because I was coming to you, I also want you to just chime in on, now not only is lockdown leading to this increase in cases of GBV, so not only are you dealing with this violence at home or in whatever household setup you're in, whether you are watching it being perpetrated against somebody that you live with, whether it's your mother, your sister, or you are the actual victim, but we now also have to deal with cyberbullying. That's also come on the increase. How has it affected, students, your peers, as we look at, dealing with not just GBV, but you now also have to deal with, yes, so I'm harassed at home, or I'm watching this going on at home, and now online, I come online and I'm being attacked. How is that affecting you guys mentally?
Well, as we all know that we are a generation that's really focused on social media, and lockdown gave us nothing to do. So the only thing that we had to do was social media, right? So we see to it that the rate of cyberbullying has increased. Like, I'll give an example of the game called Hot Seat. During the lockdown, people would just take someone, like you'd be on the seat, the hot seat, and then people would ask random questions, and some of the questions are like really offending, and it's literally cyberbullying, right? But because it was a game that everyone was playing, that meant that it would normalize it. But such cases like cyberbullying actually lead to depression, and it really affects your mental health, right? And the fact that you are inside the house most of the time, you're not allowed to go out, you don't have anyone to talk to, and we've also had cases of people who've actually opted to commit suicide because of that. So cyberbullying has increased because of the pandemic, because us as students, we normalize it. If we're not being bullied by our teachers, we're actually doing that amongst ourselves, which is not right, right? So there's a need for us to actually tell each other what's right and what's not, for us to make the right choices, which is what Say What is there for, because you'd actually see that would get people coming in to talk to us to make sure that mentally we're okay. And then adding on to what Walter was saying, I feel like as women, we misunderstand the fact that we were made from a man, not for a man, right? So when it comes to being in relationships, when a man says they want to have sex, at times you really want to say no, but then you just feel like, okay, it's my duty as a woman to make sure that what the man needs, he gets. But then we need to constantly remind ourselves that it's not like that. You're not made for the man, you're just made from the man. It's your right to say no. And when you say no, you really should mean it, not yes, no. It shouldn't be like that.
Esnat, now explain to us the Web for Life initiative.
Before I do that, I would want to appreciate maybe the efforts that are being done by Padari, because it's so exciting to see that more men are upcoming now, like occupying the spaces, are fighting against GBV, because we also have a similar platform at Say What that sensitize male students against GBV, on female students and other young women out there. We call it Amugota, the Men's Forum. So coming back to the question on COVID-19, COVID-19 presented us with 3 dilemmas. Number one, if we remember well, the first 21 days of lockdown were announced, I think 2 days before the initial 21 days, and our students were like still in shock. Everyone was not prepared at that time. So some remained at the boarding spaces and some had to hurry back home, and they wouldn't think that they are going back to the space whereby the perpetrators are there. So they are now stuck with the perpetrator, and some are stuck with their boyfriends at school where they rent. And now we have a whole nation now diverting all the energy, all the resources to the fight against COVID-19. And we see less of GBV, HIV, and SRH on the COVID-19 agenda at national level. So we have a group of young people who are just left there, and they're not even addressed on issues that really affect their day-to-day life. I'm not saying that COVID-19 is not that serious, but we have other issues to look at, including GBV, HIV, and SRH.
Life doesn't stop because we're in a pandemic.
Exactly. So coming back to the Web for Life network, it is a movement of female students and young women who are leaders and advocates on sexual reproductive health and rights. So we created that safe space for us young women to actively advance the recognition, protection, and fulfillment of women's rights, especially the sexual reproductive health rights. And we aim to do so through looking at harnessing the active action and maybe strengthening the voices so that female students and young women can make informed and smart choices in terms of their sexual reproductive health and the rights, and also accessing the services that are there in terms of that aspect of their health.
All right.
Yes.
Now, you know, as you've mentioned that it's a network of young females, and I'm going to assume that they are in universities and colleges as well. And as we've brought in with Tadiwa, the issue of cyberbullying does affect them as well. And we know that when you feel like you're being bullied, when you feel like you're being pushed into a corner, your mind is not always going to act rationally. How have you been equipping them to deal with this increase, not just in gender-based violence in their households, by their partners, but also to deal with this cyberbullying that has now become an element that, you know, look, if I'm going to be bullied and I'm being attacked at home, I'm being attacked online, I'm not going to feel like I'm worth much.
Okay.
How are you equipping these young ladies?
So when we were presented with COVID-19, also our programming, as say what changed or shifted from the physical aspect to the virtual spaces. So we also occupy those spaces to continue reaching out to our targeted audience, who are students in tertiary institutions. So we realize that in as much as this technology is bringing us good so that we keep in touch with our audience, but the same audience is presented with this toxic environment whereby they can be exposed to cyberbullying or maybe pornographic material and stuff. So our main thrust right now is to raise awareness on how young people can protect themselves when they're using those spaces. And we also took it upon us to also occupy those spaces so that we can maybe keep them busy, maybe with some of the programs that we offer them. So I think, yeah, and it also maybe goes back to this issue you're putting. It's not maybe the government's responsibility or SEWA's responsibility to make sure that the students are protected from cyberbullying. It also becomes a shared responsibility with them, because even if we come up with the policies, if we come up with the systems to protect them, if they are not aware that they should be protected or they should protect themselves from cyberbullying, we will continue having a cycle of this happening over and over again with those policies, you know, in the offices, and no one is implementing them. So it also goes back to raising awareness on that, and SEWAT has been playing like its part in raising awareness on cyberbullying and how to control it, or maybe to evade the effects of cyberbullying.
All right, thank you. Now, we have been looking, of course, at the at World AIDS Day, commemorated on the 1st of December annually and around the globe. But our special focus has been on dual action against HIV and GBV. Just have a look at this quick video. Today, Zimbabwe joins the world in commemorating World AIDS Day, which falls within the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, GBV, and the nexus between GBV and HIV cannot be ignored. As the country and the globe move towards ending HIV and AIDS by 2030, development practitioners have noted with concern how the target cannot be met if the alarming cases of gender-based violence in Zimbabwe are not stopped. This year's World AIDS Day runs under the theme Global Solidarity, Shared Responsibility, Ending AIDS by 2030. GBV, according to research, has continued to perpetuate HIV infections. GBV comes in various forms such as physical, verbal, psychological, sexual, and socio-economic violence. Child marriages, forced marriages, sexual abuse, and intimate partner violence are some of the main forms of gender-based violence that may directly lead to HIV transmissions. Young girls may be unable to negotiate for safer sex because of various factors such as gender power inequalities. In addition, women living with HIV may also face increased levels of violence, particularly due to stigma and discrimination. Sexual abuse remains the most common form of gender-based violence, according to Musasa, a non-governmental organization in Zimbabwe working towards ending gender-based violence against women and girls. Zimbabwe's coordinator of the National Response to HIV and AIDS, the National AIDS Council, notes how the coming of COVID-19 has increased vulnerability of marginalized groups to HIV. COVID-19-induced containment measures such as lockdown have perpetuated gender-based violence. Therefore, the defeat of AIDS as a public health threat depends on how the world responds to COVID-19. According to the Southern Africa HIV and AIDS Regional Exchange, the interconnections between GBV and HIV as both a root cause and consequence of AIDS are now widely acknowledged by both the scientific community and developmental practitioners. Since HIV and AIDS emerged over 25 years ago, the percentage of HIV-positive women and girls within the general population of HIV-positive people has increased globally. In sub-Saharan Africa, women constitute 60% of people living with HIV and AIDS. In the recent Global Report on Violence Against Women released by the World Health Organization in June 2013, it demonstrated that women who have experienced intimate partner violence are 1.5 times more likely to acquire HIV as compared to women who have not experienced such partner violence. Overall, this first global statistic confirms the results of several studies that have consistently shown an association between GBV and HIV infections. GBV can increase the risk of transmission of HIV both directly and indirectly. Although there is research that reveals the links between GBV and HIV, important gaps still remain in understanding the complexities of these intersections across country contexts and among different populations. This is critical because gender and sexuality are locally defined social constructions, and both GBV and HIV are informed by social attitudes about gender and the roles of men and women in each specific society. An advocate of sexual reproductive health rights among the youth, Say What, believes a dual action against GBV and HIV is critical for Zimbabwe to meet its End AIDS goal. It is the programming mantra of the organization that students in institutions of higher learning and young people require to be wholly developed to understand the nexus between GBV and HIV in order to develop and adopt strategies which protect them from both. Say What also places emphasis on male engagement in the fight against gender-based violence based on the empirical evidence demonstrating their crucial role as agents of gender and traditional transformation. The Mugota movement, which is one of the advocacy arms for Say What, is making strides in engaging young men within institutions of higher learning to positively engage in designing mechanisms which aid the fight against all forms of violence against female students, adolescent girls, and young women. Global solidarity, shared responsibility. That is the global theme that we're running with this year. And for me, that implies that it's not a one-sided conversation. Everybody and anybody needs to get involved. But as we have highlighted throughout the show, there are a lot of challenges that are in place. So maybe as we wrap up, my question becomes, starting of course with Tadiwa, how do we come together for this common goal of ending HIV, ending GBV? How do we come together as societies, as nations?
All right. Personally, I feel like from the moment, we need to take the problem from the roots, right? Instead of starting to get education like at college where you have organizations like Say What starting to tell you like, no, there's actually something called contraception and whatnot. You don't really have enough time to ponder upon that because you're being educated whilst you're also being forced to engage at the same time. Like you're facing situations that's making you engage. We need to bring the problem at home, like from the roots, where when you're at home, you need to tell your kids that yes, contraception is there, but it's not the best situation, because the moment that someone is on contraception, that means that having unprotected sex is now an option because you think that you've got protection. The only thing that most students worry about in colleges or university is pregnancy, but then HIV is a bigger problem, which people are ignoring. So if we take the problem at home, I really feel that once you know that HIV is a bigger problem, you won't have contraception as an option, right? And the other thing that I think we should do to stop HIV by 2030 is to actually tell people, like students. I think most people would not engage sexually if they had been told exactly the way that it is. In primary school, you're only told you should not have sex because you get pregnant but no one tells you that once you have sex, you're going to worry about that pregnancy, right? And that person that you're engaging with is going to abandon you later on. So I feel like there's the need to take it home where you're growing up and then you get educated. And then I think at the end of the day, the problem will be eliminated.
All right, thank you. Esnat?
Okay, I think by having that word, that terms in solidarity, it means that there is some shared responsibility and it goes beyond government, it goes beyond civil society organizations. I think it goes back to the institutions that define society, that include religion, our education system, our tradition, culture, and even families. So I think everyone needs to play their part in ending HIV and GBV, because if we let the government alone come up with policies that we celebrate, but at the end of the day we have a society which is rejecting these policies. For example, right now we are having a heated conversation on 12-year-olds accessing contraception and stuff. It's a clear picture that our society is not yet ready to accept some of this change that has impact on reducing or eradicating HIV in our society. So I think that if each and every one of us, like every breathing being, come up like and stand in solidarity and say we are fighting HIV in our society, we are ending GBV in our society, it will maybe pay off at one point.
All right, thank you, Esnat. Walter?
I wouldn't agree more. We need a multi-stakeholder approach to this thing, and I think we also need to get real. Really, I'm shocked with the debate around comprehensive sexuality education, especially in the context in which we are living now. We have people who are born positive. We have children who are engaging early, but you find that because of different persuasions, people argue that it's not important to teach young people these things. I think, to me, my experience has been that young people really know about these things, but they don't have the correct information. They don't have adequate information. So if we are to stop HIV and AIDS, we need to really start there people need to have information. People need to know that they have options that they can take if they want to take certain actions. So for me, that's important. And also, coming from an organization that works with men, I always feel that a lot of men do not have enough information, and men and boys do not have enough information as well. And I feel that in most cases, programs also exclude men. I know they're a difficult constituency to deal with. You call them to meetings, they don't come. You call them for this, they don't want to participate. But I think it's one area that's being neglected as well, to say, even if we have a lot of successes amongst girls and women, as long as the boys and men that they are interacting with are not at the same wavelength, then our efforts can get derailed, or they can be set back. So we need to focus on that special constituency to make sure that they are at the same level, and they are also participating in activities that lead to the reduction of GBV and HIV and AIDS as well.
All right, thank you very much, Walter. And of course, as the themes, both themes, global solidarity, shared responsibility, as well as dual action against HIV and GBV, both have made it very clear that this is everybody's responsibility to get involved if we are to attain that goal of eradicating HIV and AIDS by 2030. So nobody can sit back and claim ignorance. Nobody can sit back and say they don't want to get involved. It is a responsibility to be shared all around by every single one of us. Now, we have been discussing World AIDS Day, and this broadcast was brought to you by Zim Papers TV network with support from the Spotlight Initiative, the Swedish Embassy in Zimbabwe, UNFPA, and Say What. My name is Candace Mwakaliele. Be kind to each other, but be kinder still to yourselves. We'll see you.